Bibliophiles of the internet. It is not often that my weekly upload date actually falls on Halloween, but this year it does. So I thought I would have a little bit of fun with it and recommend some books that are treats and some books that are tricks. These are all great for the Halloween season and beyond. You can read them any time of the year that you want. The books that are treats are on the lighter side of things. Some are for younger audiences, some are great for all ages, and books that are tricks are on the darker side of things and mostly for adults or more mature readers. So no matter what your scare level might be, there should be a little something for everyone. I'm gonna be nice and start off with treats, and you're actually gonna get 2 for 1 in this first recommendation because they're both by the same author. You may have seen me recommend Gustavo the Shy Ghost in my recent Latina recommendations video, and that same author, Flavia Z. Drago, has 2 other books set in that same universe, the first of which, no pun intended, is Layla the Perfect Witch. This is a really sweet picture book about Layla the Witch, who's great at everything she does. She's the fastest flyer, all of her spells and potions are perfect, she's won tons of trophies for all kinds of witchy practices, and now she wants to win the Magnificent Witchy Cake-Off. But when she starts practicing, she realizes that she is an absolute disaster in the kitchen, and if she wants any hope of pulling this off, she'll have to ask her 3 magical sisters to share their culinary secrets. This is another absolutely wonderful and heartfelt story from Flavia Z. Drago. It's all about how it's okay to not be the best at everything or to realize that you still have things you need to work on. And it's also about how it's okay to ask other people for help sometimes. The other book set in the world of Gustavo the Ghost is Vlad the Fabulous Vampire, once again by Flavia Z. Drago. This picture book is about a cute little vampire named Vlad who has unnaturally rosy cheeks that are so bright and so warm that they sometimes make him look alive. So in order to avoid rejection by his fellow vampires, he hides his complexion behind these elaborate, dark, all-black outfits. But then he finds out that one of his best friends might have a pink secret of her own that just might change the way he sees himself. Again, this is just a really fun, endearing picture book about learning to be true to yourself and learning to embrace all the parts of yourself, even the ones that are a little bit different. After this, I'll be alternating back and forth between tricks and treats, but because I gave you 2 treats to start, I'll give you 2 tricks to balance things out, starting with White Horse by Erica T. Worth. This is an indigenous horror story about Carrie James, a self-described urban native whose cousin Debbie finds this old family bracelet that once belonged to Carrie's mom. Now the bracelet has called upon her mother's ghost as well as a monstrous entity, and Carrie is realizing that she can no longer be protected from this ancestral evil by her willful ignorance. I read this one a few years ago and really enjoyed it. It's a fast-paced, thrilling, mysterious story that centers a deeply fucked up character and blends together elements of horror and mystery in really interesting ways. In this case, Carrie is obviously horrified by the visions this monstrous creature is exposing her to, but she also realizes that those terrifying visions are clues that she's meant to follow if she wants to get some answers. So it's incredibly dark and twisted, but there aren't just jump scares for the sake of there being jump scares. There's a pattern and a history to this haunting, and that's the entire point. In the way of tricks, I also highly recommend The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas, but you can take this as a blanket endorsement for literally every single one of her books. But The Hacienda specifically is set in Mexico during the aftermath of the Mexican War of Independence, in which Beatrice's family lost everything. Their home was destroyed and her father was also executed. So when the handsome and wealthy Don Rodolfo begins courting her and asks for her hand in marriage, she feels that her only choice is to say yes. So she moves into his spacious hacienda, but it's not as luxurious and welcoming as she would have liked. She feels herself being watched everywhere she goes. The hacienda workers refuse to set foot in the house at night, and there are whispers about the truth behind what happened to Don Rodolfo's first wife. Again, you cannot go wrong with absolutely any of Isabel Cañas' books. They're all incredible. They're all the perfect blend of horror and desperate romance. If you haven't read her latest release, The Possession of Alba Diaz, that would go down real smooth this time of year. There are simply no bad choices. For my next treat, I would recommend checking out Nightlights by Lorena Alvarez Gomez. This is a really beautiful upper-level picture book about a girl named Sandy who catches the tiny stars that appear in the darkness every night, and every morning she brings them back to life in one of her whimsical drawings. But then there's a new girl at school who notices Sandy's drawings for the first time, and what starts out seeming like genuine interest in Sandy's art turns into a sinister hunger for Sandy's talent. This book is actually somewhere between a picture book and a graphic graphic novel. The illustrations and the artwork are really beautiful, and I think it tells a very thoughtful story as well about how there is power in creativity and how that power can be siphoned away once you start needing someone else's approval or permission to create. It's very much about relearning how to experience the joy of doing things just for the sake of doing them, and how there's something truly magical about creating for ourselves. Going back to tricks, if you enjoy space horror like I do, then you should check out Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. This story is a blend of psychological thriller and sci-fi horror. It's following a small repair crew on their final mission when they suddenly receive a strange distress beacon, which is notable because they're supposed to be alone in the far reaches of deep space. Because they have nothing to lose, they decide to trace the signal and are shocked when they find it's coming from the Aurora, a famous luxury space liner that vanished 20 years ago on its maiden voyage. So of course the crew decides to check out the wreckage, see if there are any survivors or anything worth salvaging, and things start to go very wrong very quickly. Now I wouldn't say this is like the best book in the world, but I do think it's intense, it's exciting, it's fast-paced, it keeps you guessing until the end, and overall it's a pretty good time. My next treat is a book I actually mentioned recently in my Frankenstein Book Recs video, but it's so lovely and so underrated that I have to talk about it again. That is Stitch by Padraig Kenny. This is billed as a reimagining of Frankenstein for kids. The story follows a young Frankenstein character named Stitch who was reanimated and synthetically brought to life by a scientist. But when the professor's evil nephew takes over the laboratory and wants to use Stitch and his best friend Henry Oath as fodder for much more dangerous experiments, the two of them decide that running away and trying to make a place for themselves in the human world is their only viable choice. Like I said in my last video, this story is really sweet and heartfelt. It's about loving yourself as you are and loving your friends as they are. It's a story about being brave, and I appreciate how it centers this young hero who's less concerned about whether he quote-unquote deserves the life he has and is more focused on using the life he has to do right by other folks. For my next trick, I definitely recommend Lone Women by Victor LaValle. This is a historical horror story set in 1915 and following a young black woman who is desperate to flee California because she may have killed her parents, and she also has a dark secret locked away in a steamer trunk. She feels her only choice is to become a homesteader in Montana because at this time in history, the government is offering free lots of land to anyone willing to work that land, which is kind of perfect for a young black woman with no family, no spouse, and no connections. But of course, she's not actually alone. She's haunted by whatever's locked away in the trunk, and though she's desperate to keep it locked away, it might just be the only thing that allows her to survive. If you haven't read this yet, it is so good. The structure, the writing, the atmosphere, the setting, everything works together in such a great way. It's written in these blistering short chapters as well, which really create this feeling of desperation, discomfort, and unease. It's a bold reclamation of forgotten history. It's a fascinating and innovative blend of so many genres and ideas. Definitely worth the read. On the lighter side of things, I find the book Ghost Squad by Claribel A. Ortega to be a really wonderful treat. This is a middle grade standalone novel that blends together paranormal fantasy and mystery. The story is about a young Dominican girl named Lucely and her best friend Sid who cast a spell together that accidentally awakens a whole host of malicious spirits. The two of them end up having to work with Sid's grandmother Babette, who is a witch, if they hope to somehow reverse the curse and save the town before it's too late. The official synopsis bills this as Coco meets Ghostbusters, which I would say is pretty on the nose. It's a really fun and beautifully imagined paranormal adventure story that offers friends, family magic, and ghost hunting shenanigans in spades. My next trick is a really strong horror duology that I finished a couple of months ago. The first book is I Feed Her to the Beast and the Beast is Me by Jameson Shea. This is a queer YA horror story that takes place in France and follows a young girl named Laure who is studying to become a professional ballerina, but she feels overlooked and believes that she is not getting all the opportunities that she truly deserves simply because she's black. So one day she ventures down to the catacombs and finds a river of blood that she pledges herself to and agrees to exchange her soul for the primordial power of influence so that nothing can stop her from getting what she wants. This duology is absolutely wild and vicious in the best possible ways. Laure is a truly unforgettable character who is undeniable and ruthless in her pursuit of glory and greatness. It's no secret how demanding the world of ballet can be, but this duology takes it to a whole new place. As a bonus, if you enjoy this duology or if you've read it already, Jameson has a new YA horror story out now called Roar of the Lambs that you can also check out. For my next treat, I have to show some love for the Love, Sugar, Magic series, the first book being A Dash of Trouble by Ana Mariano. This is a really lovely middle grade fantasy series. It's about a young Mexican-American girl named Leonora whose family owns a beloved bakery in Texas, and every year they go all out in making food for the annual Dia de Muertos festivities. Leo is really hoping that she can finally help her family with the preparations this year, but her family tells her that she's still too young. When she decides to try and sneak into the bakery anyways, she discovers that her mother, aunt, and 4 older sisters are keeping a really big secret. They are brujas who pour a little bit of magic into everything they bake. And in trying to prove to her family that she is in fact ready to finally join their ranks, Leo finds what she thinks is a pretty basic spell that she decides to try out by herself. Again, this is another really wonderful middle grade fantasy series that has really great things to say about friendship, family, love, and how the true magic in the world happens when we depend on each other instead of trying to do everything ourselves. Going back to Tricks, if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend Never Whistle at Night, edited by Shane Hawk and Theodore C. Van Aus Jr. This is an anthology of Indigenous horror stories. The title comes from how many Indigenous cultures across the globe have beliefs that say a person should never whistle at night because it might invite evil spirits to not just appear, but perhaps even follow you home in the darkness. So a lot of these stories sort of riff off that idea and also create an opportunity to celebrate Indigenous people's survival and imagination, even through the darkest of circumstances. For the most part, I'm usually a hard sell when it comes to short story collections, but there's something really special about this anthology and all the voices behind it. I enjoyed pretty much every single story in this collection, which is almost unheard of, and I think it also strikes a nice balance between featuring established authors like Brandon Hobson, Darcy Littlebadger, Morgan Tulty, Tommy Orange, Rebecca Roanhorse, while also making space for new and emerging voices. Going back to the sweeter side of things, I would say The Accidental Afterlife of Thomas Marsden by Emma Trevane definitely qualifies as a treat. It's about a young grave robber named Thomas Marsden who's going about his business just trying to make a living when he suddenly discovers an unmarked grave and the half-buried body of a boy who happens to look exactly like Thomas himself. Again, full disclosure, I would not say this is one of my favorite books, but I do think it's really interesting and it presents a provocative mystery for younger audiences. There are fairies, poison, gateways between worlds, mischievous orphans, and plenty of accidental forays into dark magic. For my next trick, I want to talk about what I think is one of the best haunted house stories of our time, and that is none other than Model Home by River Solomon. This is a really interesting take on your traditional haunted house narrative. It's about 3 siblings who grew up in a very wealthy, gated community in Texas, and it was a difficult experience for them not only because they were the only Black family in this very wealthy neighborhood, but because strange and inexplicable things started happening to them as soon as they moved into the house. Their parents refused to be affected by any of it and kept living there even as all their children grew up and eventually moved as far away as they could. But now the parents have been found dead in the house, and the siblings are forced to return to their childhood home to finally reckon with their family's past. This story is absolutely wild and enthralling in ways that I cannot even describe. The writing in this book is some of this author's absolute best. It feels surreal and abstract, but also incredibly grounded at the same time. And I just think it's such a brilliant distillation of the haunted house as being a metaphor for being trapped or harmed in a place that's ultimately supposed to be safe. On a much lighter note, my next literary treat would have to be Ava Evergreen, Semi-Magical Witch by Julie Abe. This is the first book in a super magical, whimsical, middle grade duology that's very much inspired by Kiki's Delivery Service. It tells the story of a young witch named Ava who only possesses a very tiny pinch of magic. She is determined to rise to the rank of novice witch before her 13th birthday because if she doesn't, she will lose her magic for good. But first she has to pass a test where she locates herself in a small town, stays there for a month, finds a way to quantifiably help them with her magic, and then fly home on her broomstick. So she finds herself in this tranquil coastal town where she sets up a magical repair shop and tries to find ways to improve the lives of the townspeople with her semi-magical fixes. This story is so sweet and so fun. Again, it takes very clear inspiration from Kiki's Delivery Service, but it's very much its own story that stands on its own merits. And not only does it celebrate a young character who has to be savvy and innovative about using the magic she has, but it's also a really great story about learning to trust yourself. For a trick, I would definitely recommend The Night Guest by Hildur Knutsdottir, translated by Mary Robinette Kowal from the original Icelandic. This is a horror novella set in Iceland following a woman dealing with chronic pain, fatigue, and sleep loss. And even though she's gone to countless doctors for help, they all claim that there's absolutely nothing wrong with her. She's perfectly healthy according to them and should be able to get more sleep if she just implements a few generic lifestyle changes. Unsurprisingly, none of their suggestions work. The main character's fatigue is only worsening and intensifying even after she falls asleep. And to make matters worse, she's also waking up to find strange injuries and marks on herself. So one night she decides to leave her smartwatch on when she goes to bed, only to find out in the morning that she's somehow walked over 40,000 steps at night. Like I said when I first read this book, I think it's a short but incredibly impactful story. It's intense, it's unsettling, it's mysterious. It's a story that very much explores disability, but the disability itself isn't the source of horror. It's the fact that we live in a blatantly ableist society that's so horrific. For my last treat, I'm going to switch things up with a humorous adult paranormal rom-com. It's a recent release called Dead and Breakfast by Rosie Thor and Kat Hillis. This is a queer paranormal rom-com about two married vampires, Arthur and Sal, who are perfectly normal and inoffensive, besides the fact that, of course, they are vampires. They just want to settle down and live a quiet life, and to that end, they finally open the bed and breakfast of their dreams. But business is a little bit slow, and to make things worse, the town mayor is suddenly found dead in their garden with 2 puncture wounds in his neck. So with the help of a werewolf barista, the elven town coroner, and a human city manager, Arthur and Sal will have to try and catch the killer if they want to clear their names and prove their innocence. This just sounds really zany and fun. It's one of those stories with offbeat humor, kind of in the vein of What We Do in the Shadows, or even something more recent like The Haunted Hotel. I love the idea of following this older, odd vampire couple as they bumble through trying to solve a crime while also running a business. And lastly for today, I would also recommend checking out Green Fuse Burning by Tiffany Morris. This is a queer indigenous horror novella following a Micmac artist named Rita, whose father recently passed. And while she's still grieving, her girlfriend secretly submits her application for a paid residency, and she ends up getting accepted. So now she's being sent off to this idyllic, isolated cabin in the woods where she's going to spend her days painting. And eventually she realizes not only is she on the same land where her father grew up, but there's also a mysterious entity calling to her every night from a nearby lake. This is a really interesting blend of surrealism, weird fiction, and even cosmic horror in some ways. It's also an eco-horror story in the sense that it posits climate change as a form of body horror in and of itself. The structure of this novella is also really cool because each chapter is categorized according to a piece of visual art in Rita's exhibition, and it's fascinating to see how it all comes together by the end. So there you have it. This year you don't have to choose. You can have both tricks and treats with any of these recommendations. Again, these are all great for the Halloween season, but you can of course read and enjoy them any time of year. If you have any book tricks or book treats that you would like to recommend, feel free to drop those down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, educate yourself, be kind to yourself, take care of yourself and others, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page.